An interesting question to consider is whether or not people choose psychological suffering. And a potential interpretation to explore is that while suffering cannot be chosen for its own sake, what it is possible to do, and what is often done, is that a person does not make the choices needed, such as would alleviate suffering. What does that mean? And what are some examples? Let's take a specific example, such as the psychological suffering that can and probably would and does accompany unfulfilled potential. If I feel that I ought to be doing X, right, but I'm not, I'm doing Y. For example, I feel that I have some kind of talent, I feel that I have some kind of potential, but I'm not realizing it. The inevitable consequence would seem to be suffering, right? The stultification, the obstruction of self and its innate satisfaction. So, am I choosing the suffering? No. But what I am choosing is to persist in my present path, and what I'm not choosing is to take the steps needed, such as, if taken, could and perhaps would alleviate that suffering. Let's say in question is a person that could be classified as highly conflicted, highly neurotic in the broad general sense. Should there such sense be? There's a lot of suffering that accompanies a psychological state that could be so classified. A person feels anxiety, a person feels confusion, a person feels alienation, alternating emotions all the time. Does that person choose that suffering and says, I want that suffering for its own sake? No, that's impossible. Somebody could say some people do want suffering for its own sake, but that's an appearance only. It is possible to pursue suffering in view of some kind of other end. For example, I believe that pain will make me stronger physically, so I pursue pain. I have some kind of other twist of my psyche, and the way to self satisfaction is to pursue some form of psychological suffering, such as humiliation, who knows what. But it's still for some kind of positive end. That's a logical necessity. So the person is not choosing suffering for its own sake. But what the person is choosing to do, for example, is to ignore um, the truths, such as if faced, could alleviate the suffering. What a person is choosing to do is to look away from any light that might reveal pertinent realities to him or her, such as, again, if faced, could unravel those complexes and those conflicts and lead to less suffering. So that is one interpretation of the question. A person is in part culpable for his or her psychological conditions. A person is not directly responsible for the way that psychology develops in view of the infusion of autonomy that uh, is in question. Meaning, let's say that I choose to, um, you know, grab a hot um, something hot that I get burned. Then I don't choose. That's just how nature works, how reality works. But I chose, let's say, to grab it. So if I, for example, refuse to face some kind of truth, to sustain some kind of legitimate suffering, to be courageous in some situation and do what I need to do, I make that choice. And then what follows, I don't choose. The complexes, the conflicts, the neuroses, the suffering, I don't choose that. It just follows. Like dominoes, let's say, nature. Right? But I did make some such choice. So when we find people that are excessively entangled in their psychological um, kind of again complexes, conflicts, all that kind of stuff, the person never made a choice. I'm going to be like this. The person never made a choice. I'm going to suffer because just for its own sake. The person made a series of small choices to not face truth when given the chance, to run away from reality, when there was an alternative, and so on. And what followed from then followed by necessity, more or less, and the suffering also follows by necessity. So we can consider where we are misusing our range of freedom to avoid telling ourselves some kind of truth, avoid facing something like this. And that would probably be the way forward. Thank you for listening.